There's a lie that circulates through poker rooms and training sites and YouTube comments. The lie says that winning poker requires complex calculations performed in real time, that professionals sit at tables running algorithms in their heads while everyone else struggles with basic arithmetic. That math is what separates winners from losers. This lie keeps people away from understanding. It makes poker math seem intimidating, inaccessible, reserved for a special type of mind that most people don't have. And because the lie feels true, because math in school was hard, because numbers under pressure feel impossible, people accept it without questioning. Here's the truth nobody tells you. The math that matters in poker is embarrassingly simple. A child could understand it. The difficulty was never the math itself. The difficulty was that you were taught to think about it wrong. You were taught that math is calculation, numbers out, formulas to memorize, percentages to compute under pressure while the clock ticks and your opponents stare at you. And because that version of math felt hard and unnatural at the table, you decided you weren't a math person. You decided you'd play by feel instead. You'd trust your gut. You'd read souls. But here's what real poker math actually is. It's not calculation, it's clarity. It's seeing situations for what they are instead of what your emotions want them to be. It's having a framework that tells you what's correct before your fear or hope or ego has a chance to interfere. Think about driving. When you approach a red light, you don't calculate whether to stop. You don't compute momentum and braking distance. The light tells you. Red means stop. You've internalized the system so completely that compliance is automatic. Poker math works exactly the same way. Once you understand the principles, and I mean actually understand them, not just memorize them, decisions become obvious. The math becomes invisible. You stop calculating and start knowing. Here's what I'm promising you. By the end of this video, you'll know within seconds whether a call is profitable. You'll stop tilting from bad beats, because you'll understand what's actually noise and what's signal. You'll never again lie awake wondering if you played a hand wrong. This isn't about becoming a human calculator. It's about seeing poker the way professionals see it. Stop chasing outcomes. Start stacking edges. That's what separates long-term winners from everyone else. Let me start with the only concept that truly matters. Everything else in poker math is a variation of this single idea. If you understand this one thing deeply, everything else clicks into place. Expected value. You've probably heard the term. Maybe you've seen formulas with plus signs and multiplication. Maybe you've heard people say a play is plus EV or minus EV. Maybe you nodded along pretending to understand while feeling completely lost. Here's the simplest possible explanation. Expected value answers one question. If I made this exact decision in this exact situation 1,000 times, would I come out ahead? That's it. That's expected value. Not the outcome of this hand. Not whether you win or lose right now, but the average outcome across infinite repetitions of the same situation. Think of a coin flip where you win $2 for heads and lose $1 for tails. In any single flip, you might lose. You might lose 3 flips in a row. You might lose 10. Someone watching might think you're unlucky. But flip that coin 1,000 times and you'll profit around $500. The expected value is positive even though individual flips go against you regularly. Poker works identically. A call might lose this specific hand. You might run into the nuts. The river might crush you. Your opponent might hit a 2-outer and stack you. But if the same call in the same situation wins more than it loses over thousands of repetitions, it's the correct play. The result of one hand tells you absolutely nothing. The pattern across thousands tells you everything. I knew a player once. Solid fundamentals, good reads, studied constantly. Over 3 months, he ran what statisticians would call 2 standard deviations below expectation. In plain language, he got destroyed by variance, set over set 4 times, lost with aces 7 times in 2 weeks. Flush over flush twice in 1 session. He didn't just lose money. He lost his mind. Started questioning everything, changed his entire strategy based on results that were pure noise. Eventually quit poker convinced he wasn't good enough. 2 years later, he looked at his database. His decisions had been correct the entire time. He had been winning. He just couldn't see it through the variance. This is why professionals seem emotionally detached from individual outcomes. They're not robots. They feel the losses. Nobody likes getting sucked out on, but they understand that a single hand is meaningless data. It's noise, not signal. What matters is whether they're making decisions that win over time. The amateur gets destroyed by a bad beat and questions their entire strategy. They wonder if they played it wrong. They doubt themselves. The professional gets destroyed by the same bad beat and thinks, good, I got my money and good. The math will take care of the rest. Expected value doesn't promise you'll win today. It promises you'll win eventually if you keep making the right decisions. And that promise is backed by mathematics that cannot be argued with. Now let me show you how expected value actually shows up at the table, because understanding the concept is one thing. Applying it is another. You're holding a flush draw on the turn. 9 cards in the deck complete your hand. The pot is $200. Your opponent bets $100. What should you do? Most players think about this emotionally. I might hit my flush. I've been running bad. Maybe this is my time. I don't want to fold and then see the flush card come. These are feelings, not decisions. Here's where most players go broke without realizing it. Here's how to actually think about it. The pot is now $300 with your opponent's bet. It cost you $100 to call. You're paying $100 to win $300. That's 3 to 1. Now, will you hit your flush more than 1 in 4 times? With 9 outs and 1 card to come, you'll hit roughly 19% of the time. That's about 1 in 5. You need 1 in 4. The math doesn't support calling. You're paying a price that exceeds the value of what you're buying. It's like paying $10 for something worth $8. You might get lucky occasionally, but do it enough times and you're broke. This is pot odds. The pot offers you a price for your call. Your hand has a probability of winning. If the probability exceeds the price, you call. If it doesn't, you fold. Shopping, not gambling. Now here's where it gets interesting. What if your opponent has another 100 behind and will pay you off when you hit? Suddenly the math changes. You're not just winning the current pot. You're winning the current pot plus future money. This is implied odds, the money that will go in later if you make your hand. That flush draw that couldn't call based on current pot odds might be a clear call when you factor in the chips you'll win on the river. But there's a trap. Most players wildly overestimate their implied odds. They imagine perfect scenarios where they hit and get paid every time. Reality is messier. Sometimes you hit and they fold. Sometimes you hit and they have a bigger flush. Sometimes the action doesn't develop the way you imagined. Implied odds must be realistic, not optimistic. You have to honestly assess whether you'll actually get paid, not just fantasize about it. The difference between good players and great players is often just accurate projection of future betting. Stop chasing outcomes. Start stacking edges. That's the mindset that makes pot odds and implied odds work for you instead of against you. I want to show you the other side of implied odds, the dark side that ruins players who don't see it coming. You're holding king-queen suited. You flop top pair with a flush draw. Feels great, right? You have a strong hand and a backup plan. But the board is paired and your opponent is betting aggressively. You call the flop. You call the turn. The river completes your flush, and you're feeling good. You bet for value. Your opponent raises all in. This is the moment where amateurs panic. Suddenly that flush doesn't feel so strong. They could have a full house. They could have a bigger flush. Your hand that seems so powerful is now a liability. You've hit your draw, invested significant chips across 3 streets, and you might be drawing dead. This is reverse implied odds. The money you lose when you make your hand, but still lose the pot. It's the silent killer that most players never think about. When you're drawing to the second best hand, you don't just lose when you miss. You lose even more when you hit. Because hitting gives you confidence. Hitting makes you put more money in. And then you discover that hitting wasn't enough. Think about it like investing in a company that's in the same market as a giant competitor. You might succeed, but if the competitor crushes you, all the money you invested while succeeding is gone. Second-order thinking asks not just what happens if I hit, but what happens after I hit. The players who lose the most at poker aren't the ones who can't make hands. They're the ones who make hands that aren't good enough and can't get away from them. They're dominated by better draws, trapped by disguised monsters, paying off hands they should have seen coming. Reverse implied odds are why professionals often fold hands that look strong to amateurs. They're thinking ahead. They're asking what happens not just now, but 3 streets from now. They're seeing the trap before they step in it. The danger isn't missing your draw. It's hitting your draw and then paying even more to discover you've lost. Let me introduce another concept that changes everything once you understand it. We've been talking about your probability of winning, but there's a difference between having a strong hand and having a large share of the pot. This is equity, and it's more useful than hand strength. You have pocket jacks. That's a strong hand in a vacuum. But your opponent raised under the gun and re-raised your 3-bet. What does their range look like? Aces, kings, queens, ace-king. Against that range, your pocket jacks are an underdog. Your hand is strong, but your equity is low. Now consider a different scenario. You have a combo draw, something like a flush draw, plus an open-ended straight draw. Your hand isn't made. You'd lose at showdown right now, but you have 15 outs. Your equity against most hands is actually higher than pocket jacks against a premium range. This is the mistake that feels smart and is expensive. Judging hands by their face value instead of their actual equity against what your opponent likely holds. Professionals think in equity because it captures what actually matters. Not how your hand ranks in a vacuum, but what percentage of the pot belongs to you based on realistic outcomes. This reframe changes how you value hands. You stop being impressed by face cards and start calculating your actual share. You stop feeling strong when you're weak. You stop feeling weak when you're strong. You see clearly. Quick note before we continue. If this way of thinking is clicking for you, I put together a free PDF that breaks down these decision-making frameworks in a way you can reference at the table. There's also a more complete $10 ebook if you want to go deeper. Both are linked in the pinned comment. Now back to equity, because this connects to something even more powerful. Equity thinking reveals fold equity, which might be the most underrated concept in poker. Fold equity is the profit you make when opponents fold to your bets. It's invisible money. You never see it at showdown because there is no showdown, but it's real and it compounds. Every bet you make has two paths to profit. Path 1, your opponent calls and you have the best hand. Path 2, your opponent folds and you win without showdown. The aggressive player is playing both paths simultaneously. The passive player only has path 1. This is why aggression is mathematically profitable. You have more ways to win, and fold equity specifically explains why bluffs work. You don't need the best hand if they fold. The math doesn't care whether you are bluffing or value betting. The pot is yours either way. Speaking of bluffs, let me destroy a common misconception. This is something most players get completely backwards, and it costs them money in both directions. Most players think bluffing is about deception, fooling your opponent, making them believe something false, acting, keeping a stone face, looking strong when you're weak. The whole poker movie fantasy. This framing is wrong and leads to bad strategy. It makes people bluff in the wrong situations for the wrong reasons, and it makes people afraid to bluff when they should. A bluff is not a lie. A bluff is pressure applied at a moment when your opponent's range cannot defend itself. Here's what I mean. You're on the river. The pot is $200. You have nothing, but the board is scary. You bet 200. Now your opponent faces a decision. They need to call 200 to win 400. That's 2-to-1 odds. What hands can they profitably call with? Only hands that beat you more than 1 in 3 times. Everything else should fold, not because they believe you, but because the math says folding is correct. You're not trying to convince them you have the nuts. You're not acting. You're not reading their soul or outplaying their mind. You're betting an amount that makes their range uncomfortable. Most of their hands become unprofitable calls simply because of the price you've set. The math forces them to fold, not your acting ability. This is where poker stops being emotional and becomes mathematical. This reframe matters because it tells you when bluffs work and when they don't. Against someone who never folds, who calls with anything, fold equity is 0. Your bluff is pure waste. You're betting into a brick wall. Against someone who folds too often, fold equity is massive. Your bluffs print money regardless of your cards. Reading opponents determines bluffing profitability, not your poker face, not your acting skills, not whether you can keep your hand from shaking. Whether they're capable of folding determines whether the math supports the bluff. And here's the counterintuitive part. Bluffs don't need to work very often. If you're betting pot, you only need your opponent to fold 50% of the time to break even. If you're betting half pot, you only need 33% folds. These aren't demanding success rates. These are achievable against most opponents in most situations. The amateur thinks bluffing is high-risk gambling. They think you need to be some kind of actor or psychologist to pull it off. The professional knows bluffing is applying pressure at frequencies the math supports. It's not about fooling anyone. It's about putting opponents in situations where folding is correct for their range. Bluffing is not lying. It's math that happens to look like lying. Let me show you how commitment works in poker, because this determines which decisions you actually get to make. Most players don't realize they've already committed to a pot long before they feel committed. You raise pre-flop to 15, someone 3-bets to 50. You call. The pot is over 100. You have 250 behind. Now the flop comes. Your opponent bets 100. If you call, you have 150 behind and the pot is over 300. If you call the turn, you're likely all in on the river, regardless of what happens. Do you see what just happened? You went from deep stacked to almost pot committed in 2 betting actions. By the turn, you're effectively playing for stacks, regardless of what you flop. The decision to play for your tournament life, or your entire buy-in, was made before you saw a single community card. This is stack-to-pot ratio, or SPR, the relationship between remaining stacks and pot size. And it determines everything about how a hand will play out. Low SPR means you're committed. You can't fold without surrendering significant chips. Decisions become binary, all in or fold. There's no room for nuanced play, for creative lines, for representing hands you don't have. You're playing a simple game of who has the best cards. High SPR means you have flexibility. You can fold without crippling yourself. You can represent different hands across multiple streets. You can navigate complex situations with maneuvering room. You're playing poker, not just flipping cards. Here's why this matters practically. You can engineer your SPR through pre-flop decisions, by raising larger or smaller, by calling versus re-raising, by choosing which hands to play from which positions. You control how committed you become. The pre-flop decision isn't just about your cards. It's about what kind of game you want to play post-flop. With a hand that plays well when committed, like a big pair that wants to get all in before dangerous cards come, you might want low SPR. Get money in while you're ahead. Build the pot so that by the flop you're essentially committed to continue. But with a hand that needs room to maneuver, like suited connectors that want to see cheap flops and make big hands, you want high SPR. Keep options open. Don't build pots you can't escape from. Professionals consider SPR before entering pots. They're not just looking at their cards. They're imagining the entire hand, visualizing stack sizes at each street, making sure they don't end up trapped in awkward commitments. The amateur looks at their whole cards and decides to play. The professional looks at their whole cards, stack sizes, opponent tendencies, and position, then decides what kind of commitment level makes sense for this specific situation. SPR makes commitment visible. You can see how trapped you're going to be before you feel trapped. Now I want to talk about something that keeps most players stuck. The belief that poker math requires precise calculation. You're at the table. The action is on you. The clock is ticking. You don't have time to calculate the exact pot size, convert your opponent's bet to a percentage, determine your precise equity against their estimated range, and compute the expected value of each option. Good news. You don't need to. Professionals don't calculate at the table. They've calculated before they sat down. What they do in-game is estimate. They use mental shortcuts built from thousands of hours of study. They know, without calculating, that a flush draw is roughly 2-to-1 against on the turn. They know that pot odds of 3-to-1 require roughly 25% equity. They know the common situations so well that recognition replaces computation. This is how expertise works in every domain. The chess grandmaster doesn't calculate every possible move. They recognize patterns from thousands of previous games. The doctor doesn't reason from first principles for every patient. They pattern match based on experience. The expert has seen this before. The implication is liberating. You don't need to be a human calculator. You need to internalize the benchmarks, the common situations, the patterns that appear over and over. Then, at the table, you're just recognizing what you've already learned. Study the math away from the table. Learn what pot odds look like at different bet sizes. Memorize the equity of common drawing hands. Understand SPR thresholds. Then, when you play, you're not calculating. You're remembering. Precision belongs in study. At the table, estimation is enough. And estimation is fast, natural, and doesn't interrupt your focus on reading opponents and managing the table dynamic. This is why the best players look effortless. They're not geniuses doing complex math. They've done the math so many times that it's automatic. The hard work happened before you saw them play. I need to talk about variance because misunderstanding variance is what destroys most poker players psychologically. It breaks their confidence, warps their thinking, and makes them quit games they should be winning. You make the correct play. You get your money in with 80% equity. You lose. Next hand, same situation. You lose again. You start to feel cursed. The next session, you run kings into aces 3 times. The session after that, you miss every draw while your opponents hit everything. You flop sets and lose to running cards. You make hero calls and they always have it. You start to wonder if you're actually good at this game. Maybe you were just lucky before. Maybe you don't understand poker at all. This is variance. Short-term results that deviate from long-term expectation. And it's the most psychologically challenging aspect of poker. More players are destroyed by variance than by any strategic leak. Here's what you need to understand. Variance is not a bug, it's a feature. It's the reason poker is profitable at all. Think about it. If skill always won immediately, if the better player won every hand, bad players would quit after their first session. They'd lose consistently, realize they can't win, and stop depositing money. The ecosystem would collapse in weeks. There'd be no one left to beat. Variance keeps bad players in the game. They win sometimes. They have big nights. They hit miracle cards and stack the professional. They feel lucky. They convince themselves that poker is about luck, which means they have a chance, which means they keep coming back. They come back with more money. For the skilled player, variance is a temporary nuisance that obscures long-term truth. Bad runs happen, good runs happen, but over sufficient volume, your actual edge emerges from the noise. The math doesn't lie. It just takes time to tell the truth. And the more hands you play, the more clearly the truth speaks. The psychological challenge is enduring short-term noise while maintaining long-term conviction. Most players can't do this. They win and think they're geniuses. They lose and think they're frauds. They change strategies based on results that are mostly random. They chase what worked yesterday and abandon what will work tomorrow. The professional interprets variance correctly, as meaningless noise around a true signal. They don't overreact to short-term results because they understand those results are mostly variance, not information about their skill or their strategy. This requires training. The ability to lose for days or weeks while remaining confident in your process is not natural. It's developed through understanding how variance works and trusting that understanding more than trusting your feelings. Variance is not your enemy. It's the smokescreen that hides your edge from those who can't see through it. Let me connect this to something even more important than poker. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Everything we've discussed, expected value, pot odds, equity, variance, all of it applies directly to life decisions. Poker is just a concentrated fast feedback version of how all decision-making works. It's a laboratory for choices where you get immediate measurable results. Every decision you make has an expected value. The job you take, the relationship you pursue, the investment you make, the city you move to. You're always comparing potential outcomes, probabilities, and costs. You just don't call it EV, but that's what it is. Every opportunity has pot odds. Is the potential reward worth the certain cost? Should you take the risk? The math is the same whether you're calling a bet, or accepting a job offer, or starting a business. You're always asking, is the price right for what I'm buying? Every long-term plan involves variance. Good decisions produce bad outcomes sometimes. Bad decisions produce good outcomes sometimes. You can do everything right and still fail. You can do everything wrong and still succeed, at least for a while. But over enough iterations, quality separates from luck. Process matters more than outcomes. The people who win at life are the ones who've internalized these principles without calling them poker terms. They think in expected value without using the phrase. They assess risk versus reward accurately without drawing decision trees. They don't let short-term variance derail long-term strategies. They don't quit because of one bad year. And here's the most important parallel. Math is an antidote to emotion. In poker, when you don't know what to feel, calculate. Fear is telling you to fold. Ego is telling you to call. Hope is telling you to chase. But what does the math say? The math provides structure when emotion provides chaos. The math gives you something solid to stand on. In life, the same principle applies. When you're paralyzed by a decision, strip away the emotional noise and look at expected outcomes. What are the realistic probabilities? What are the real costs? What does rationality suggest when you ignore the fear and the hope and the pride? This doesn't mean ignoring intuition. Intuition matters. But intuition should be built on a foundation of clear thinking, not replace it. The best decision makers are those who've internalized rational frameworks so deeply that their intuition aligns with logic. Math doesn't eliminate emotion. It gives you a place to stand when emotion tries to move you. Let me tell you what happens when you internalize all of this. Not just understand it intellectually, but actually internalize it at a level where it runs automatically. You stop calculating and start seeing. You look at a pot, a bet size, a situation, and you just know. Not because you're fast at math. Not because you're doing complex calculations in your head. Because you've done this math so many times in so many situations that it's become recognition instead of computation. You stop fearing results. A bad beat hurts. It always will, but it doesn't shake your confidence. You understand that variance is noise, and your process is signal. You detach outcomes from self-evaluation. You know that the result of one hand says nothing about whether you played it correctly. You stop needing to win every hand. You're playing a different game than the amateur who celebrates each pot like a lottery ticket. You're accumulating small edges, building a mathematical fortress that variance cannot penetrate over time. You're thinking in thousands of hands while they're thinking in moments. You become calmer. The emotional roller coaster that destroys recreational players never gets you. You've seen too much variance to take it personally. You've made too many correct decisions to doubt your framework. The bad nights don't break you because you know they're part of the process. And here's the final transformation. The math becomes invisible. You no longer think about pot odds because you see pot odds. You no longer calculate equity because you feel equity. You no longer wonder what the correct play is because correctness has become obvious. The concepts we've discussed today become automatic, running in the background of your mind, producing correct decisions without conscious effort. This is mastery, not doing math faster, doing it so many times that you stop doing it at all. The math disappears into instinct, the thinking becomes non-thinking, the complex becomes simple, and this is what separates the professionals from everyone else. Not talent, not intelligence, not some special gift for numbers, just thousands of hours of deliberate practice until the complex became simple and the conscious became automatic. Until they could walk into any situation and know, without thinking, what the right move was. You now have the concepts: expected value, pot odds, implied and reverse implied odds, equity, fold equity, SPR, variance. The work ahead is internalization. Study these concepts. Apply them. Do it over and over until they become automatic. Stop chasing outcomes. Start stacking edges. Do it long enough, and the math will disappear into instinct. That disappearance is the goal. Let me leave you with something that will stay with you beyond this video. The math we've discussed is not about poker. It's about decision-making under uncertainty. Every significant choice you make involves incomplete information, probability, and risk. Every outcome you experience contains signal and noise. Most people navigate this uncertainty emotionally. They feel their way through decisions, hoping intuition will guide them. Sometimes it does. Often it doesn't. They have no framework for separating good decisions from bad ones, so they judge everything by results, which means they learn the wrong lessons constantly. You now have a better framework. You understand that decisions should be evaluated by process, not outcome. You understand that short-term results are mostly noise. You understand that small edges, accumulated over time, produce large results. You understand that math is not calculation. It's clarity. It's seeing situations for what they are, stripped of emotion and bias and wishful thinking. This framework will serve you at the poker table. It will serve you equally in business, in relationships, in every domain where you make decisions that matter. The players who master poker math don't just win at poker. They think better. They evaluate more clearly. They react less emotionally. They trust process over outcome and long-term over short-term. If this video gave you a clearer understanding of poker math, share it with someone who's still afraid of numbers. Leave a comment telling me which concept clicked the most. And if you want more content like this, subscribe to Mind of a Grinder. This channel is not about tricks or secrets or shortcuts. It's about fundamental understanding that transforms how you play and how you think. You came here wanting to understand poker math, but what you actually learned is how to think in edges, how to see through noise, how to trust process over outcome. You don't need to calculate more. You need to see more clearly. And now you do. Luck is short-term. Edges are forever. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.